talks about the Anthropic Economic Index. We have read about it earlier as well, but this time they are focusing on AI's impact on software development.
Yes, I think a very nice rendition of how things go across a combination of automation and augmentation. Yeah, the Amanda, what do you think here? Amanda, could you hear me?
She's on mute. Amanda, you're on mute.
Yeah,
Yes.
sorry about that. So
That's
this one, I mean, I could go back and forth on this one. I don't know that it's essential for all leaders, but I mean, it's just another indicator of how agentic AI is kind of changing the landscape. So I don't know if there's anything earth shattering that stood out to me in this article in particular, but um, I guess I could land on important for this one.
All right, Amanda's landing on important. Shows some, it's good. I think there's 500,000 interactions involved in this thing, so a lot of data. What do you think here, Luda?
Yeah, I think it's indicative of how. So they're focusing on software and coding, right? And they observe certain key things and automation versus augmentation. That it's more it's more automation than some of it is augmentation, and also are there ways of people using the software for coding and how they do it. There's a lot of vibe coding here. The programming languages that they're using. So it's indicative of how it will potentially evolve in other industries. And that's why I was thinking important. And there's something new here that people are, they didn't tell us the various sources, only the two, Claude AI and Claude Code, but it indicates that startups are using more of it than anybody else. So it's interesting observations that I think are worth flagging. So I back up important.
All right, we're headed for important. I agree, important. Tim, what do you think?
Agree. Yeah, this is good work. Again, this is you and all of us used to say way back when TV Guide was more valuable than the TV stations because it was the information about the information, and this is similar. They're not Google, so it's not Google Trends, but it's pretty interesting stuff that they have coming through. And it does get across a couple of important messages. One is that startups tend to do well with newer technologies, and you really should pay attention to that, larger firms. And then the coding story just in a little more detail. So I think important.
Yeah, and Anthropic is, so many people use Anthropic for coding. I think they have a, in this particular domain, a very good sample. Because
they do.
Yeah. All right.
Yep. And there is some issues with it, but again, the large data size makes it really worthwhile.
Yep.
All right. Empiricism lives despite the attack on science. All right. Next, Anka.
The next one comes from Microsoft, and it provides us a taxonomy of failure mode in agentic AI systems.
Yeah, I thought this was pretty interesting. They're out trying to figure out what the failure modes are and helping their customers. What do you think here, Tim?
I think I gave this one an important as well. I think it's a good framework for thinking about both the kind of old and new security challenges related to LLMs. So it's a good framework. It's not incredibly long. So I think it's good for leaders to have this in their mind. It's important stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it lays out a lot of ways that people are trying to attack and failure modes, and these are such new markets. These agentic systems. What do you think here, Amanda?
Yeah, I was on important as well with the case study with that whole memory poisoning, and there's like that graphic in there that I think is really nice and easy to follow within the article that the leader can kind of eyeball and dig in a little bit there, which I like. Anything that's kind of like easy that I have to sit there and really think about it right now. So I like that. So yeah, just in general, I think also important topic. So I'm on important.
All right. And when you say the graphic, you mean the one on like page 12, the context and setup thing, that thing?
Yeah, let's see. I was just in there. Yeah, yep, page 12, that like kind of like flow on the memory poisoning.
Yep. What do you think, Luda?
Actually, I was between important and essential.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you go scroll to the 2x2 Ankash, the overview of failure modes, they put they put taxonomies on safety and security, right, and how they looked at this. But then they divided it into novel and existing. And novel safety and security failure modes for agents specifically, right, that we haven't seen before how they can happen and what you might want to do uh, to to fix that, right? And then they give at the end a case study for an email poisoning process or failure mode in very big detail. So I actually thought that this is a maybe essential piece of work that indicates that you need to work with agents specifically for failure modes.
Okay, so you're headed for essential on this one.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, I could be talking to essential. I mean, in terms of just such a, I mean, it's early days, it's a good framework, it's empirical. Let's go ahead and give it an essential. All right, essential it is.
Okay.
Next, Ankash, please.
Okay, yeah, the next one comes from semi-analysis and talks about Microsoft's data center freeze.
Yeah, semi-analysis here, slowing down a little bit in terms of Microsoft's build out. What do you think, Luda? Important, optional?
I rated it optional. So it's semi-analysis is a good firm that kind of watches what's happening very carefully. And they're trying to essentially adjust the perception on the market that since Microsoft is cutting their contracts, it's all doom and gloom. They would not need this capacity going forward, and that's really not true. And they actually pointed out. So it's just an adjustment. They had quite a bit of capacity internally developing, and they are slowing some down. They had non-binding contracts that they got out of, but they had a lot of other contracts that were binding that are happening in and will give them capacity in 25. So it's a big adjustment, but it's actually positive for the industry. And if you look at this chart, if you go up with the bar chart, they are 60%, if not more, of the capacity that they tried to grab 60% more of the capacity than other folks, right? So this is this just was too much, right? And they're adjusting between the internal and the external capacity, and I think it's a normal adjustment and it's optional, but it's positive development actually.
All right, we got an optional positive development here. Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, totally optional for the AI leader right now. This is if you're an investor, this is really interesting.
Yeah.
But a lot of speculation. There's a million reasons this could be going on, and we'll see when they start to report earnings. Again, they might have just done this as what in the investment community we call window dressing because they're about to report earnings.
Sure.
And investors hate CapEx. They love the returns, but they hate the investment. So there's just a million reasons this could be going on, and they could also be nervous because everybody's talking about a slowdown around the corner. So who knows? And also it could have been a competitive move a year and a half ago to freeze everybody else out of the market. Just grab all the leases you can as long as they're non-binding. So there's just way too much speculation in here for an AI leader to make sense of.
Okay, Dr. A, we're going for optional. What do you think?
Yeah, so my only comment on this is, and I just looked it up again to see if there's any talk about it this year, and I found something late February this year, is this push towards nuclear, okay, which is different than here. And Microsoft is a leader in that, in the small modular reactors.
Yes.
And Reuters did an article, I just found it late February, and I'm not sure if there's anything newer, that said they are investing there. So while this article can tell us that they're doing away with things, whatever, coaling, whatever, they're still looking at nuclear. So I don't know that they're getting rid of things for data centers. So I think this article is optional because it's not that I don't believe it. I just don't think it's complete. But I want to point that out of this whole nuclear aspect of data centers. And Amazon was name dropped, Microsoft, and I forget who else is out there. But the point is the big players are still looking at
power consumption is a real issue. And yeah, and again, they're not saying Microsoft's not growing their capacity. They're just saying they're not growing it as fast.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's give this one an optional. This guy's also, Gates has been a longtime investor in small nuclear as well as fusion. So that's interesting.
Yep.
All right. All right, Akash, next. Quen 3. Think
Right.
deeper.
So
act
think
faster.
deeper, act faster. Yeah.
Here we go. Quen, continuing the wonderful gobbledygook of naming conventions in the context of this AI model. I guess they have, whatever. It's really kind of nutty when you think about it. They should go to I think the people who are best at naming are drug companies. They come up with all these words you remember that are completely ridiculous words. Anyway, what do we have here, Amanda? What do you think?
Yeah, I feel like this is very, very product announcement-y. So just to put that out there, I'm pretty optional. The only thing I would say is, again, there's this push on cost effectiveness, like this open weight LLMs, things like this. But the fact that it's really just very product announcement like, I feel like it's optional.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was optional as well, some incremental improvement. But what do you think here, Tim?
Yeah, I'm thinking mostly optional. I can almost give it an important because this is they give some more detail on what they do, like how many tokens they use. Also, it's as good as the OpenAI models at much smaller, relatively speaking, 235 billion parameters against probably, we don't know, but let's say 4 or 5 times that for the large frontier model. So, and it's, another example of Chinese companies really pushing these smaller open source models that are becoming increasingly powerful.
Yeah, and some interesting algorithmic innovation, kind of deep thinking versus shallow thinking, hybrid non. What do you think, Luda?
Yeah, I was torn because I think this will power a lot of small developers, startups, because it's totally open weight. It's a couple of models you can actually toggle on and off thinking versus no thinking, so save some on costs. You can pre-train. They give quite a bit of what pre-training, how they used reinforcement learning and where they used it, and post-training. So it's kind of very open models, and it's several of them. So I think it's worth noting, even though the leaders might not actually use them per se in the enterprises, I think the startups will. So it's worth knowing that this is happening. So important maybe for me.
And globally too. I mean, you look at the language support and so forth. It's really quite comprehensive, and and with all the political craziness going on in the U.S. Right, I was just talking to one of the major model vendors yesterday, and as they go to Europe, the fact that they're a U.S.-based company concerns the Europeans, right? Because we don't know where policy is going to go in this country anymore, and so that's, I think, all to the benefit of the Chinese for sure. All right, let's give it an important. Important is Ankaj next.
So the next one that we have talks about RAG and does it make LLM feel less safe?
All right, Tim, is VentureBeat just making news here or reporting news? What do you think?
I gave this an optional because there just isn't enough detail to really make sense of it and how big a risk this is. So it kind of feels a little bit like clickbait. Bloomberg, has done a lot of work early on and did a study that they claim shows that RAG-based systems, for whatever reason, fall prey to malicious instructions that non-RAG-based systems don't. But they don't know why. And they don't have any direct solutions other than put more guardrails in place. So That's good advice anyway, but doesn't really help the situation. And it's just one example, so it's not clear how widespread this is.
Okay, so we're going. We've got kind of a once over lightly, what I think of as a Reagan-esque kind of approach to things, but that's my critique of Ron Reagan. But the Amanda, what do you think? Optional, important here? What is it?
Yeah, I agree with Tim. There's not enough substance in it to really dive too deep. So, I mean, yeah, if somebody maybe wants to dig in a little deeper on this, but then it kind of defeats the point of the article at that point. So, I think I'm optional on this one too.
All right, Luda, we're heading for the big O. What do you think?
Optional. It's interesting to know, and I always suspected that, but I think it's it's optional.
All right, optional it is. Ankaj, next and last.
The last one comes from Boston Consulting Group, and they talk about new GenAI tools offer an edge, but why aren't more professional services firms using them?
Yeah, not that BCG is asking me, but I hate this article format. Even
Yeah.
though when they article. But anyway, what do you think, Luda?
Yeah, the format is quite not user friendly, I would say. Yeah, so this survey was done with 300 people, December 24. So it's a little bit dated. I don't think it actually, the summary came out, and so they're now looking at it, right? And they're essentially asking the question, the specialized tools, right? The specialized per industry tools are out there, and they provide more security, more better answers, better results, really. And only 40% of the legal, financial, and tax and accounting folks are using it. Why, right? And the same barriers come up. It's problems with protecting data and training not being available, things like that. So there's really nothing here per se that we haven't spoken about before. So I gave it an optional.
Yeah, sometimes you read these things and you wonder, are these people unaware of adoption curves? Of course, you're always in the early part of a market. You're always going to have a difference between the early adopters, late adopters. Anyway, what'd you think, Tim? Optional?
Yeah, I gave this optional. It's interesting. I think we saw a better article about this kind of stuff, a review of the professional services industries a couple of weeks back.
Yep.
You know, I don't think it was very well thought through. The reality is there are lots of reasons you can think of why this is problematic, and I use the term absorption. If you have a sponge, it can just only absorb so much water, and after that, it just takes a while. And I think that's the same problem you have in organizations, whether you call it the early adopter issue or the reality is for most people they're already busy. So you have to displace something to use a new tool. They're already really, really busy in any successful firm, especially consultants and professional services people. They are limited by their hours. And so in order to give up hours, it's like what we were talking about before about CapEx. Everybody likes the results, but everybody hates the investment. And so nobody wants to take the time out to reduce their hours or increase the number of hours they're working per week in order to attain these new skills without absolute definitive proof it's going to be incredibly powerful. And the reality is there is no proof of that right now. A lot of this is still sort of speculation. We've done a number of experiments at Manat. It's a mixed bag.
Yeah.
It's just a mixed bag right now, especially if you're using Copilot or these other tools that are built in. They're not, you're also limited by the tools. So there's just a lot of factors that influence this, and I don't think this addresses most of them.
There is an interesting bit. I'm sorry, John. There's an interesting exhibit one, I think, where you were before, Ankash, is an interesting piece of data, and it's obvious, but this is supported with the 300 people that the output of specialized Gen AI tools requires less rework than of general tools. As I said, it's obvious, but this is now kind of proving in the data.
Yeah. No, yeah, and to your point before, Luda, this was before deep research. Deep research from DeepSeek.
Yeah.
The first one came out in January. This is December of 24. Anyway, we are living in a world where 3 months is old news. What do you think, Amanda? Headed for optional pretty hard here.
Yeah, I'm also optional because again, it's like, what about money? I mean, this is great, but if you don't have the money, you can't invest in specialized tools. You can't build it from scratch. You can't add on. So to me, it's a kind of like a no-brainer. Either you have the money and you make it more specialized and you put more time and effort, or you don't. And then you're stuck with general tools. So I don't know that we need a whole article from them to kind of tell the leader the obvious about budget. We kind of already know this. So I'm very optional as well.
All right, optional it is. Ankaj, that's the last one. Please do the tote board. Any announcements from anybody? Are things any great AI adoption you saw in Tuscany there, Luda?
No, not
No?
yet.
All
Not
right.
yet. No AI in
Yes.
Tuscany
Yes.
visible.
I imagine the Po Valley is going to be a late adopter, but that's my guess. All right. We have one essential, two importance, three optionals today. So hope that helps you with your reading this week. And one thing I will say is that we do continue to see, those organizations that are adopting faster actually start to pull ahead a bit. And we're starting to see the wave of what I think are silly articles, which is articles that basically say, hey, we did a lot of experimentation. Now we need to focus. Yeah, that's the nature of experimentation and focus. Same thing with overinvestment in a category. Yes, of course, there's always overinvestment. That's the nature of investment. It's a competitive market with expected values. But anyway, be ready for the silly articles, but progress continues. And we look at stuff like Quinn, and it's just, pretty amazing what you can do for very little money. All right. Thanks, everybody. See you all tomorrow. And thanks again, Luda, Tim, Amanda, and Ankash. Bye-bye now.
Bye.